So parallel flaw questions, would you say that's pretty much the same? You just have to identify the flaw. What is it that the argument's missing? And then just find in the answer choices something that does exactly the same? Or is there something a little bit different to parallel flaw questions?
No,
Why
it's,
is it
it's
parallel?
yeah, it's pretty much what you just described. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's ID the flaw, so same as a regular flaw question, but then with the extra step after you have formed an abstracted idea of that flaw like in a sense like a general principle, you then have to apply it to another situation. So it's a two-step process there, which is why those can be more time consuming. Like any parallel question is more time consuming. So the first step is simply recognizing the flaw for yourself. And if you don't see the flaw, I wouldn't even move to the choices yet because the choices likely aren't going to help in that case. Slow down and find the flaw and thoroughly understand the stimulus first.
Right. The flaw being something that the argument is overlooking or like a fallacy.
Yeah, so something, either it's a classic logical fallacy or they're overlooking something. I use the phrase failing to consider because that's what the LSAT does too. And then alternatively, they could take something for granted. So in the Yelp example I gave, we could be failing to consider that Yelp reviews are biased or unrepresentative in some way. They're taking for granted that the reviews are a reliable indicator.
Mhm. Right, and the failing to consider questions are the ones that trip me up actually.
Yeah. So
Uh,
failing to consider simply means that they are neglecting some possibility oftentimes.
right. All right, cool. I think I'm done with flaw question types.
Sure.
So kind of shifting gears into reading comp. So where I struggle with reading comp is with comparative passages. And so like my approach to it has been I read like one of the passages and then I go to the questions. And then after I like answer as many questions as I can based off that one passage, I go back and I read the second passage and then I finish up the questions after that. And so, like one thing, like I'm trying to figure out an approach to comparative passages, and one thing that it reminds me of are like the disagree question types in LR, where there is, or any kind of question type in LR where there's like two stimulus types. I'm trying to make a connection there, but I'm still working on it. Are there any kind of takeaways, would you say, that I might be able to draw from like LR2 stimulus types to like my approach to comparative passages, or should I just like think of comparative passages on their own, or?
I would think of them separately because point at issue questions or point of disagreement questions, there's one clear point where one person would say yes, the other would say no. But in dual or comparative passages, they're not directly at odds with each other a lot of the time. They're usually not overlapping entirely, but the point where they do overlap is not always a yes-no distinction. There could be a difference in their emphasis sometimes where one example would be one passage A talks about insects and passage B talks about bees specifically,
Mhm.
but they're not always going to be at odds. And in fact, a lot of the time they're not at odds. So I don't see them being quite that similar. I think the logical reasoning connection to reading comp is really more in question types where you have a strengthen or weaken or parallel in reading comprehension, which oftentimes becomes much more time consuming.
Right. I'm noticing that there are kind of like ways to cut time with comparative passages. Like they tend to be like more simpler in terms of the content in each of the passages, in each of the paragraphs of the passages. So maybe there's like less analysis to do there. But okay, sounds good.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.